All my life is in your hand. This whole world may hold me down, but it can never drown you out. I'm not merely flesh and bone. I was made for something more. You are God, you're the great I am. Breath of life, I breathe you in. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you. You are strong in my brokenness, sovereign over every step. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you. Through the dark, I hear your voice. Rising up, I will rejoice. For I was lost, but now I'm found. 'Cause even death can't hold you down. You are God, you're the great I am. Breath of life, I breathe you in. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you. You are strong in my brokenness, sovereign over every step. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you. Oh. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. Christ who lives within me. From beginning to the end, you deserve the glory. You deserve the glory. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. Christ who lives within me. From beginning to the end, you deserve the glory. You deserve the glory. You are God, you're the great I am. Breath of life, I breathe you in. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you. You are strong in my brokenness, sovereign over every step. Even in the fire, I'm alive. You are God, you're the great I am. Breath of life, I breathe you in. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you. You are strong in my brokenness, sovereign over every step. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you. Oh. Even in the fire, I'm alive in you, Jesus. Only alive
Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes Church. My name is Cody, and I am the digital pastor here at Prairie Lakes. And I just want you to know, I'm really glad that you made the decision to be here with us today. And right off the bat, we need you to hear that we're a no matter church. And what that means is no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or even what's been done to you, we need you to hear God loves you. You don't have to clean yourself up for that to be true. You don't have to be perfect to be here. We are really glad that you're here. And if you are new, or you're newer and you just haven't taken that step and becoming known, I'd encourage you to take that step here today, because we know connected people are growing people. That step of becoming known is a major step in your faith journey. And just as a thank you for taking that step, I'll send you an Amazon gift card here today if you do it. So to take it, all you need to do is fill out our welcome card. It takes about 30 seconds, and you can get to that by taking out your phone right here in this moment and texting PLC to 99581. And one of the next steps that we take here is inviting boldly. And as a church, we want to talk about the things that are important to those outside the walls of the church from a biblical standpoint. And that gives us a great opportunity to be invitational to those in our little Iowas. And that's part of the reason that we're kicking off a leadership series here this weekend. So my encouragement to you is to not just let this series, this message today, be a blessing to only you, but to attend today with the question in your mind is, who in my little Iowa might this be a blessing to? And if you have that prompt or that nudge or the answer to that question, to actually act on it, to send them a link to the sermon, or maybe to invite them back with you next week. So let's be invitational here this weekend. And on the screen right now, we get to see some pictures of baptisms that happened last weekend across the state of Iowa. And baptism is just an incredible picture of the work that God is doing in the lives of these individuals. And I just want to say thank you, because that is possible in part due to your generosity. So thank you for being generous this past year. And if you want to take that step in giving generously, you can do that right now by going to prairielakes.org/give. And if you call the online campus home, you can even give right to our online campus from there. But we're going to continue in our service here today. Before we get to the message, our team's going to sing a song called High Hopes, which is a special element setting up the message.
Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Mama said, fulfill the prophecy, be something great, go make a legacy, manifest destiny. Back in the days we wanted everything. Mama said, burn your biographies, rewrite your history, light up your wildest dreams. Museum victories every day, we wanted everything. Mama said, don't give up, it's a little complicated. All tied up, no more love, and I hate to see you waiting. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living. Didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. Mama said, it's uphill for oddities, stranger crusaders ain't ever one of me. Within the novelties, don't ever change. You wanted everything. Stay up on that rise, and never come down. Oh, stay up on that rise, and never come down. Mama said, don't give up, it's a little complicated. All tied up, no more love, and I hate to see you waiting. They say it's all been done, but they haven't seen the best of me. So I got one more run, and it's gonna be a sight to see. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living. Didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a time, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. I always had high hopes. I always had, oh, I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes.
Hey, welcome to Prairie Lakes. Thanks for joining us this weekend. We've got something pretty special for you because we're kicking off a new series this weekend. And series title might raise a few eyebrows because here's what we're calling it, okay? Here's the series. The series is called When Leadership Feels Like a Four-Letter Word. Now, here's my preferred way of displaying it. It's when leadership feels like, right? Now, if you're taking notes, okay, if you're taking notes, that is actually spelled, right? Just make sure, okay? Make sure you got it, okay? Because, of course, we never condone the use of those actual four-letter words around here at Prairie Lakes, and I'm sure none of us in the room or online has ever let one of those slip out of our mouths, all squeaky clean here at PLC. But man, oh man, okay, man, oh man, if you've been in a leadership position during these last few years, or if you've had to step into a leadership role, it has felt like one of those four-letter words, sometimes more times than not. It's just been a really tough season to be a leader. It just has. And I want to give you some stats to back this up, okay? Here's one stat. CEO turnover in Fortune 500 companies in 2022, like this year, is expected to rise as much as 30% over 2021. 30%. Starbucks, Gap, Pinterest, Under Armour, Southwest Airlines, all of them have seen this happen in their respective companies this year, and there's more to come. Now, the highest turnover rate we saw in CEOs was actually in 2019, believe it or not, for the pandemic. But you got to remember, like, this was with all the social upheaval and the Me Too movement and George Floyd and climate stances, and it continued to rise in 2020. Certainly as the pandemic began, it leveled off in 2021 as people were looking for stability, but now, on the rise again in 2022. In the Society for Human Resource Management, they conducted a survey of over 1,000 C-suite leaders this year, and here's what these leaders said. 76% of them said, the pandemic negatively affected my well-being, and the 24% are pretty much liars, right? 40% of them said, I always or often feel overwhelmed. And then almost 70% says, I'm considering quitting for a job that better supports my well-being. And that's a really interesting one, I think. But, essentially, no thanks. I'm out, not worth it. And that's what happens when leadership feels like a four-letter word most of the time. Now, maybe it's no surprise to you, but maybe it is. There's actually some similar data when it comes to pastors. I've cited them before, but Barna Research, the Barna Group, it's a pretty big research firm that tracks a bunch of data and trends within American churches. And here's some of their most recent data. They released this in August, but they asked a bunch of pastors, have you given real serious consideration to quitting being in full-time ministry within the last year? 42% of them said yes. And just for reference, in 2021, that number was 29%. That was already high, but now even higher. And so that's a pretty high number. So Barna asked, well, why? Why are you considering quitting? And when they asked pastors that, here were their top 3 reasons for seriously considering quitting ministry. The top at 59% was the immense stress of the job. Second, 43% said, I'm thinking of quitting because I feel lonely and isolated. And then almost 40% said, I'm sick of dealing with the current political divisions in my church. So those are the top three. And if you're curious, the next three on their list of I might quit were all tied at around 30%. So one out of every three pastors, their next three reasons were this. I'm unhappy with the effect this role had on my family, number one. I'm not optimistic about the future of my church. And my vision for the church, where I want the church to go, conflicts with the church's direction. Where I want to go, the church doesn't want to. So it turns out leadership can feel like a four-letter word inside the church as well. And for a lot of pastors, that four-letter word is spelled D-O-N-E. Done. Now, kind of a bummer of a way to start an introduction of a series. And at this point, you might be wondering how your pastor is doing, and maybe wondering if there's some sort of underlying reason why I'm sharing all of these statistics with you. Well, let me just reassure you, okay? Every single pastor at Prairie Lakes, every single campus, they're all perfectly happy. You don't even need to ask them. Don't even ask them, okay? You just take my word for it. And if they tell you any different, you can send me an email, jesse.tink@prairielakechurch.org, and I will look into it. No, I was kidding. So, hey, listen, okay. The point that I'm trying to make, is this. Leadership is hard sometimes, and in the past few years, it's been hard most of the time. Which is the whole point of this series that we're doing. Because in what is probably one of the hardest seasons of leadership we've seen in a while, here's what we want you to know, okay? Here's what we want you to know. More than ever before, your leadership matters. More than ever before, your leadership matters. Why? It's a little bit of the principle of scarcity right now. The higher the challenge means more leaders are hopping out, which means fewer leaders, okay? So high challenge plus fewer leaders now means what? Means that your leadership matters more because there's just less of us around. It just is. And let's camp out here just a little bit because I want you to grab onto this, especially if this is the situation you're in right now. Because a lot of us right now, here's our situation. We've watched good people leave. And they left for a variety of reasons. They left for greener pastures. It's been a pretty competitive labor market. So there's a lot of opportunity. People are hopping around. Sometimes they've left because of downsizing or restructuring. There's some constrictions and restraints and uncertainty in our economy. Whole host of reasons, okay? Whatever. Good people have left. But you have stayed. You stayed. And because you stayed, you didn't get rewarded. Because you stayed, what happens? No, you got left holding the bag. Because you stayed. And now maybe you're not just doing your job, you're doing the parts of several jobs, or maybe a couple, 2, 3 jobs. And you're doing that not just because you've been told that's what you have to do. You're doing that because you're the leader. And that's just what leaders do. But everyone has their limit. We already seen that. No one can sustain that forever. No one can be Superman or Superwoman forever. And as we're seeing from some of the data, there's just a point at which you're trading your well-being for a paycheck, and the stress of it all just isn't worth it. And if that's you, I get it. I get it. This isn't some sort of guilt trip intended to cause you to feel bad about how you're feeling. All right. But I do want to talk to those of you who have made the decision to stick it out and you're in a leadership position and it's been kind of tough sledding. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling under-resourced, if you're feeling isolated, stressed, taken for granted, maybe like the whole world is against you at times, I want you to know the best leader to ever walk the face of the earth felt exactly the same way and had to walk through exactly the same leadership season. Jesus led a lot of people, but he spent most of his time leading 12 guys. And he did that for about 3 years. And one of those guys was named John. And John was very close to him, one of the closest followers Jesus had. John ends up living into his old age. And in his old age, he writes what is basically a memoir about his time as a young man following Jesus around. And one of the memories he writes about in his account was a time in which Jesus miraculously healed a crowd of people, miraculously fed a crowd of people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And if that wasn't amazing enough, right after that, Jesus literally walks on water. And as you can imagine, those kinds of things made Jesus pretty popular. The small circle of followers that he had turned into crowds of wannabe followers and fans literally overnight. And as John continues to tell his story, this growing crowd started to try to track Jesus wherever he went, but also kind of act cool about it, like it was just, like they were just randomly running into him. And it was at this point that Jesus, instead of doing something that a lot of leaders do, which is just build on his popularity with the crowds, instead Jesus says a few things that really don't go over very well with them. First thing he says is this in John 6:26. He says, Jesus answered, very truly I tell you, hey, you're looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, meaning, you don't want to know the meaning or the power behind them or the person I'm pointing to. No. You're looking for me because you ate your loaves and you had your fill. You got a free lunch. So rather than just receive their adoration and do something to build on his own popularity, Jesus instead calls them out for their mostly selfish motivation. And then Jesus says this, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world, which is kind of a weird thing to say in conversation, kind of weird. And probably why those who listen to him say that responded to that like this. Then the Jews began to argue sharply among themselves, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? He couldn't really mean that, which is a fair question, I think, because it's kind of a weird thing for Jesus to say. Jesus, could you clarify? Because cannibalism seems to be kind of a weird way to get into this group, And so Jesus clears up any confusion when he responds here in verse 53 and 54. Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. Gross, right? Which predictably prompted this response. On hearing that, many of his disciples said, this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Who can accept it? And from this time, many of his disciples turned back, and they no longer followed him. Now, because we know the whole story, we know that what Jesus was talking about wasn't cannibalism. We know that he was talking about the death that he would die on the cross and how God would use the death of his flesh and the shedding of his blood to pay for all of the sins that our flesh and blood committed, and removed everything that stood in the way between us and God. And it brought us real life, everlasting life, for all of those of us who believe. But back then, they didn't have the benefit of hindsight. And so in the span of just one chapter of John's account, and a mere hours in Jesus' life, Jesus goes from being offered book deals on how to build a platform to looking around to see if he still had any followers. The greatest leader to ever lived through that season of leadership. And so, if that's you, and that's the kind of season of leadership you're walking through now, you're in good company, number one. And number two, the series really is for you, because we want to not just empathize with you, we don't want to just encourage you. What we also want to do is be helpful to you as a leader. So every single weekend, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover a different leadership topic that we think is pretty important, pretty relevant for the season of leadership that a lot of us are walking through. And here's what this is going to look like, a 3-week series. This weekend we'll be talking about vision. Next weekend we'll be talking about margin, which is something that a lot of us as leaders are chasing but not finding. And then the third week we'll just talk about leading people. And how do we do that? Okay, so let's get into it. Let's talk about vision this weekend. You've probably heard the term visionary leader before. You probably have heard that term, I'm guessing. Some leaders even describe themselves as visionary leaders. I'm a visionary leader. Oh my gosh. By the way, you probably tell, I don't really get along with those kinds of leaders usually. Because to me, when someone describes himself as a visionary leader, what I hear is someone who probably likes to talk a lot about big ideas, but probably doesn't enjoy figuring out how to roll up their sleeves and actually do those things. Hand to the plow and try to realize that vision. Because these are the people that say things like this, okay? They say things like, I'm just a big picture guy. I didn't want to punch that guy right in the throat. Not metaphorically either, literally, no, just kidding. Kind of kidding, okay. They say that. They say, I don't really get into the weeds. I don't really get into the weeds. What do you do, would you say? Or they say things like, that's pretty tactical. Let's keep it high level. Now, okay, in all fairness, and my cynicism aside, my brain can kind of work on that level too, and there are certainly conversations in leadership that need to start big picture. I mean, sometimes we get caught in the tactical, we get caught in the weeds, and we don't ever really get to the big picture. So that's very true, but what I'm trying to say is that at some point, someone has to actually figure out, how to do it, right? So we can get a little cynical, I think, about this idea of vision. But I think this idea of vision is actually a pretty important aspect of leadership, and it's a pretty important leadership concept. So let's demystify it just a little bit, hopefully strip it of some of its baggage. So here's a little cheat sheet I use a lot when I'm talking about this, little cheat sheet, and we'll get to kind of what vision really is. But mission answers the question of why. Why do we exist? It's kind of a rallying cry. Vision answers the question of where. Where are we going? What's our clear picture of the future? What does success look like? Strategy then answers how. How are we going to get there? What are the steps from here to there? So let's just kind of lead us on the screen here, because at Prairie Lakes, we say a lot of things that fit into this framework, okay? So what's our mission at Prairie Lakes? Our mission is to be a no-matter church. We exist to be a no-matter church, no matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, what's been done to you. God loves you, and we are the kind of church that you can look for God wherever you start from, wherever you're at on that journey. That is the thing that literally gets us up in the morning, in all sincerity, okay? It's something that just stirs our emotions. It's the kind of church that I want to be a part of and build. It's what makes us distinct, all right? So that's mission, that's our mission. What's our vision at Prairie Lakes? Our vision at Prairie Lakes is to reach Iowa. We want to reach our entire state. We want to dot our state with no-matter churches that launch no-matter followers into their part of little Iowa where God's planted them. And we want to do that. We were pretty aggressive. We wanted to do that like one campus per year. But that's our vision. We have a vision to reach our clear picture of the future is Prairie Lakes campuses dotting the state, where Prairie Lakes no-matter followers are reaching their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers, their circle of influence. That's our vision, all right? And what's our strategy? Well, we got a lot of them. We have weekend services, and we have groups, and we have missions, and we have volunteering, we have serving, and we have baptism. I mean, there's a whole host of strategies, family ministry, that we'll do in order to reach that. We have expansion strategies that help us launch campuses well. We got a whole host of things that are helping us get from point A to point B, okay? But for this weekend, vision, okay? Vision is where are we going? It's this clear picture of the future. And if we use that definition of vision, here's what we're going to understand. We're going to understand vision isn't just some sort of pie in the sky ideal of how it ought to be. That's a wish. That's not a vision. Vision is a clear and concrete picture of how it will be that you can kind of measure. You can kind of determine, are we hitting that or not? Is there more no matter campuses, no matter churches around Iowa or not? Are we stuck or are we going, you know? It's this picture of what success looks like. Now, in light of that, okay, in light of that definition, let's just talk as we've kind of finished our time together this weekend. Let's just talk about just some vision lessons, just how vision works and how to use it. And believe it or not, we've actually learned our first lesson already as we were reading from John 6. But here's the lesson, the first lesson that we need to learn just about vision. Number one is this: good vision both attracts and it repels. It both attracts and repels. Now, that might not be intuitive to some, because why would you say something is good if it's repelling people? It would seem like it would make more sense to say good vision attracts, period. And then bad vision repels, period. But that's not true. It's actually a both and. Good vision both attracts and repels. Why? Why? Well, it's because good vision is clear. A good vision is clear vision. And when the vision is clear enough for people to decide that they want to chase after it or not, some will, and some won't. That's how it works. See, a vision that nobody rejects, that's not a vision at all. That's candy, you know? That's truisms. Those are sentimental sayings a lot of times. I mean, everybody might agree with them, but they don't get anybody anywhere. They don't cause anybody to change their life in order to realize it. Probably because that vision isn't clear enough to move anybody in a different direction than they're already going. But clear vision will. Clear vision is going to help people see, which will help them decide, do I want to go your way? Do I want to follow you where you're going or not? We saw this from that part of Jesus' story in John 6. Tons of people saw that and they were like, no, thank you. No, thank you. I was here for the bread and fish, not so much here for the flesh and blood. That's gross. But I want you to take a look at a verse that we didn't read from John 6, which is right after the one where John said many of Jesus' followers left. Here's how John 6 kind of ends in 67 through 69. Jesus is speaking and he says, you don't want to leave too, do you? Just think about that. Because he asked that of the 12. The Son of God, honestly and sincerely looked at the 12 guys he had invested the most in and sincerely asked him, are you guys out too? Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We've come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. It's clear to Peter. And clear vision not only repels, what does it do? It attracts. And as leaders, you have to let it do both. You have to let it do both, because here's what we know from Jesus' life. Change movements are built not on the backs of massive crowds because of the massive appeal. They're built in the hearts of the faithful few. That's how it works. People left in droves. People left Jesus in droves that day. But here we are, 2,000 years later, talking about Jesus, because Peter and a few other dudes saw that vision. They saw it clearly and they pursued it. So don't get discouraged, leader, when you watch people opt out. It's discouraging, I know, but don't let it get to you. Focus on the people who stayed. Make the vision clear to them. You can build a lot on that. You can build a lot. All right, that's the first lesson on vision. Here's the next one. Here's the next one. In the absence of vision, people will make up their own. That's how that works. Because why? Because we're made to chase. We are. In the absence of vision, people will make up their own. Why? Because we're made to chase. We're made to chase. I do a good bit of coaching. Not like sports teams coaching, but like one-on-one coaching. And some of the people I coach are principals or they're administrators. Some are pastors. Some are just kind of people I've met through Prairie Lakes or by word of mouth. But they're all leaders. That's the thing they have in common. They all lead people. And this one that we're talking about here, this one usually hits them like a ton of bricks when they hear it, because it sheds so much light on a problem that a lot of them share, but a problem that feels so slippery or so confusing. The problem is this: why aren't your people moving in the direction you want them to go? Why aren't they moving in the direction you want them to go? Well, a lot of times this explains it. A lot of times it's because the leader hasn't provided a clear enough vision for them to demand steps to realize that vision. And so what do? They make up their own vision. They make up their own, and they shoot for that. I was meeting with a friend the other day who said that his wife has a boss who meets with her once a year. Okay, and the meeting that they have this once a year is the performance review. It's the only time that the boss and the employee are in the same room together meeting. And now maybe you hear that story, you kind of think, well, it's probably because they're working remotely. No, different building, but same town. Once per year to do the performance review. So in the absence of clear vision, right? When you're never around casting the vision, in the absence of that, well, what do you think the person's going to do? Well, she's going to make one up. She's got to make one up because I got to define success. I got to shoot for something. And oh, how frustrating that must be for her, you know? Because she's going to get your performance review every year, and she's going to learn in real time which parts of her vision were right and which parts weren't, you know? Take a look at this, okay? Take a look at this verse from Proverbs. It says exactly the same thing. 29:18 says, where there's no revelation, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction. This is from the NIV. The King James Version says this, where there's no vision. Right? Vision and revelation, the same word in the Hebrew, just translated a little bit differently in the English. Where there's no vision, people perish. They cast off restraint, right? But blessed is the one who keeps the law, happy is he. People are designed all of us, we're designed to chase after a vision, to chase after a future that's better, to realize something, to be successful, to whatever it is. That's how we're designed. We need vision like we need our next breath. And so if you want to watch good people go, if that's kind of your deal, just make sure they aren't quite sure what success looks like. Make sure they don't know what they're really shooting for. Make sure they don't know really what the preferred future looks like. Then just wait for them to define it themselves. Then tell them they defined it incorrectly. And then chastise them for it. You're going to have a lot of positions to fill in very short order. In the absence of vision, people will define it for themselves because we're made to chase. As leaders, we have to provide clear vision. Number 2. Okay? Last one, final lesson on vision. Clear vision will cause people to demand clear next steps. Will cause them to demand. Listen, if your people aren't asking you how, then you can be sure you're not being as clear as you need to be. Let me show you how this looked in Jesus' life. We looked at an earlier part of John's account, John 6. But later in John's account, Jesus tells a very small but loyal group of followers some more troubling news. And so this is in John 13. Here's how the story goes. Jesus says, I'm going somewhere that you can't go. Peter says, where's that? Jesus says, well, I'm going to qualify that for you, Peter, because you are going to go to the place that I'm going to go, just not now. You're going to do it later. And Peter says, well, why later? I'll give up my life for you right now, if that's what you're talking about. And Jesus says, no, that's the thing you will do later. You're going to give up your life for me later, but actually right now, you're going to deny me, not just once, but 3 times. Great leadership tactic on Jesus' part, right? Just sow seeds of alarm on your leadership team. Then we get to John 14, and Jesus says this. He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that weren't so, I wouldn't have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you in my Father's house, I'll come back. I'll take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Okay, that sounds a little bit better. Jesus, a better vision. That's a vision I can get behind. You're going to God's house. That's a future I like. You're making reservations for me. That is a future that I really like. And that sounds great, super clear. But then Jesus says, and you know the way there. You know. I mean, it's like he's described some awesome Airbnb and the pictures look awesome, but then he doesn't give you the address. That's what it feels like. But clear vision will cause people to demand clear next steps. How are we going to get there? Which is exactly what Thomas, one of his followers, does. Thomas said to him in John 14:5, Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? I love guys like Thomas. I'm kind of Thomas sometimes, right? Because Thomas is the guy around the table who's the only one willing to look stupid, but ask the question that everybody else is asking but doesn't have the courage to ask. That's what Thomas does. You lost me, Jesus. So talk to me like a dummy, if you would. I don't know how to get there. So Jesus responds just graciously and clearly. And just here's the bullets. In 14:6, his next thing he says, well, okay, Thomas, I'm the way. So I say, you know the way, you know me. I'm the way. And he says, believe me. Keep my commands. Love one another. That's the next step. I'll send my Spirit to help you. That's the next step. See, there are your steps. There are your steps. The vision is to live in God's house with him forever. That's the future, super clear. But that clarity demanded clear steps. Jesus, how are we going to get there? Well, Jesus says, through me and my death on the cross, believe, do what I say, love each other, and I'll help you along the way. Clear vision demands next steps. Okay?
Thanks for that message, Pastor Jesse. And we all lead in some capacity, whether it's in our homes, in our workplaces, in our communities, in volunteering roles, whatever it is, we're all leading. And we should all strive to lead more like Jesus, to be better leaders. And we just want to help equip you to grow in your leadership. So we've curated some resources that we'd like to get to you. So we have a landing page that you can get to by texting LEADER to 99581. And on the page, we have resources for leading yourself, leading others, for leading results, to leading with a clear vision. So encourage you to check that out, to click around. And if there's something in there that someone in your little Iowa might benefit from, send them a link to the page. Tell them that you're thinking about them and that they might benefit from that resource here today. So encourage you to check that out. That'll be live throughout the series here the next few weeks. But kids, you are up next. So Children's Ministry is about to begin, and everyone else, we'll see you back next week.
quit and not go where I'm going. But I'm never ever gonna stop, and there's no signs of slowing. Ooh, now I'm moving backward. Ooh, I'm moving forward. 'Cause you give me the power to never give up. You give me your power when it's more than enough. I made my decision, quitting's not an option. No matter how hard it gets, I know I'm in, 'cause you give me the power. I'm committed to your plan, so I'll follow all of my days. Every day you give me strength to follow after your way. 'Cause you give me the power to never give up. You give me your power when it's more than enough. I made my decision, quitting's not an option. No matter how hard it gets, I know I'm in, 'cause you give me the power. Yeah, you give me the power. Ooh, now I'm moving backward. Ooh, I'm moving forward. 'Cause you give me the power to never give up. You give me your power and it's more than enough. I made my decision, quitting's not an option. No matter how hard it gets, I know I'm in, 'cause you give me the power. Yeah, God gives me the power. You give me the power.
Welcome to Story Lab. This week, we're talking about grit, while we take a look at the story of a group of people who were stuck between an army and, well, the deep Red Sea. Oh, and we're also going to be doing this. Hey, I'm Skylar.
And I'm Sebastian.
We're talking about grit, which is refusing to give up when life gets hard.
Or refusing to get grouchy when every day for a whole week is cloudy.
I like cloudy days.
Really?
They're good for thinking and reading.
And hot chocolate.
There's actually a Cloud Appreciation Society.
For reals? Wow, there really is. You should see the stuff they have posted.
That's a lenticular cloud. They often form over mountains or even tall buildings.
Looks like a pancake. I should have had breakfast this morning.
Check this out. These cloud rolls are called morning glories. They show up when a downdraft from an advancing storm causes moist warm air to rise and cool fast.
Looks like cloud twizzlers.
Here's another one.
What?
Mammatus clouds. They can form when ice crystals fall out of cumulonimbus storm clouds.
I'm pretty sure that's a set of a Marvel movie. I've changed my mind. I think every day should be a cloudy day.
Good, because we're about to make our own cloud right now.
Yes! Let's make it!
Step 1, find a large glass jar.
Done.
Step 2, fill a cup with ice cubes.
So far, so good.
Next, you're gonna want to take the lid off of your jar. And step 3, boil some water. And then pour it in the jar. Make sure you get a grown-up to help. And once you have a fair amount, carefully swirl it to warm up the sides.
It's hot.
Yes, it is. Next, turn the lid upside down and fill it with ice cubes. Then you're gonna let it wait for 20 seconds.
What are we supposed to do for 20 seconds?
This next part has to be fast. Step 6, what's gonna happen is you're going to remove the lid, pump hairspray into the jar, and then immediately put the lid back over it. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Can you do it?
I can do it.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
I can see it brewing.
Release the cloud.
Oh, that's so cool. Bring on the cloudy days.
Good, because there's a ginormous pillar of cloud in today's story.
It's time for
The story before the story.
Today, we're in the second book of the Old Testament, Exodus.
God made a plan to bless the whole world through one family, the Israelites. But for hundreds of years, the Israelites had been enslaved in Egypt.
They cried out to God for help, and God sent a man named Moses who faced down the king, Pharaoh. After a lot of crazy plagues, Pharaoh let the Israelites go.
But even though the Israelites were free, they're not yet safe.
And that's where our story starts.
Hey everyone! Okay, so as we all know, the Israelites were all packed up. Thousands and thousands of people, families, kids, herds, and flocks. You can imagine, they couldn't move very fast. God was leading them every step of the way, away from Egypt, appearing in a pillar of cloud during the daytime and a blazing pillar of flame at night. At last, the Israelites came to the Red Sea, which stood between them and the desert road to Canaan. But while the Israelites set up camp along the shore of the Red Sea, back in the palace, Pharaoh was having serious second thoughts.
What have we done? We've lost all our workers. Prepare 600 chariots at once.
Pharaoh jumped in his chariot and led an army of chariots and horsemen racing across the desert after the Israelites. The galloping horses and rattling chariots kicked up clouds of dust, and soon the Israelites could see them coming. There was no way they could outrun the Egyptian army. The Israelites were trapped.
Why did you bring us out in the desert to die?
It would have been better to stay in Egypt than die out here.
The Israelites wanted to give up, but Moses kept his eyes fixed firmly on God.
Don't be afraid. Stand firm. The Lord will save you today. The Lord will fight for you. Just be still.
Right there, in a place that seemed like a trap, God spoke to Moses.
Hold out your walking stick. Reach out your hand over the Red Sea to divide the water.
Divide the water? Okay, that is not what water does. But God's presence in the pillar of cloud moved from the front of the Israelite caravan and stood behind them all night to block them from view of the Egyptians. Moses reached his hand over the sea. Through the night, God sent a strong wind to push back the waters. Soon, the Israelites faced a dry path right through the middle of the Red Sea. I mean, can you imagine what it must have felt like? You're at the edge of a vast sea, but straight ahead the water just boop, splits. I mean, ginormous walls of water rise up on either side of the path before you. Sure, I mean, you want to escape the Egyptians, but if you walk along this path, the waters could fall on you. I mean, it must have taken every ounce of courage and grit they had. But the Israelites followed Moses along that path, straight through the heart of the sea. All night, those families hurried toward freedom. But the Egyptians gave chase. They followed the Israelites right into the Red Sea. At last, the Israelites made it through. But the Egyptians were right behind them. God spoke to Moses again.
Reach out your hand over the sea.
As Moses reached out his hand, those walls of water began to crash down, and the sea rushed back into place, washing over the Egyptian horses and chariots. The entire Egyptian army was swept away. The Israelites were left safe and dry on the far side of the Red Sea. Moses' sister Miriam led them in a song of celebration.
I will sing to the Lord, He is greatly honored. The Lord gives me strength and protects me. He has saved me.
The end.
Whoa, things must have felt so out of control for Moses and the Israelites.
Oh, for sure. But God was in control the whole time. God opened up a way for them to just keep going.
So, what's our part in the story?
Well, there are some times when you feel stuck, right? Like maybe one particular subject at school is super hard for you and you feel like it'll never get easier. Keep going. Because God knows what you're facing. God will walk with you the whole way through.
Or you're just starting in a new school and you haven't been able to make friends just yet. Don't give up. God can help you find friends when you least expect it.
And best of all, God gave us Jesus to show what it looks like to keep going.
Exactly. I mean, Jesus didn't give up loving us, even though it cost him his life. And when we follow Jesus, we have the power of the Holy Spirit to keep going too.
That is amazing news.
Isn't it? All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye, Erica. So here's the thing. Hold on, because God is still in control. Knowing that can help you grow grit.
And God makes some pretty incredible clouds.
Is that a dog?
That's definitely a werewolf howling.
Thanks for joining us in the Story Lab. See you next time.
I think that one's Winnie the Pooh.